have this friend named Joy. Joy is absolutely amazing. I mean, her name is Joy, so right there, you know, she's going to be amazing, right? She is a wonderful chaplain. We are great friends. We love one another. We wrote a book together, and we remained friends after we did that. And Joy, my wonderful friend, is one of the most strongest introverts I know, even stronger, even more there in the back. Joy is such an introvert. And I would like to say for the record that we also shared an office together for about 3 years, and we were still friends. So now I hear y'all laughing because it is not a great shock to anybody here that I am not overly fond of quiet solitude. Could anybody have guessed that? I know you're looking at me like, what? No way. God made me an extrovert, right? An extroverted extrovert. Is that what you're saying? Extreme extrovert. Now, let's not get too crazy. Okay. God made me that way, y'all, okay? I am happiest when I am surrounded by other people in the middle of conversations with them. Like at ladies' night when we go to the other place, if I'm there early, which rarely happens, but if I am, I like to sit in the middle of the table. Not because I have to be the center of attention, but because I want to talk to every single person there and know what is going on in the lives of every single person. If I enter a room full of 100 people, I have 100 new friends. Maybe it is a little extreme, but I like to take care of my friends. I like to cook for my friends. I like to love on my friends. I do like to listen to my friends and hear their stories. Now, we look at me and then we look at Joy, and she's a wonderful friend, and Joy also likes her solitude. She loves to meditate, especially when walking in the labyrinth she has that she built in her backyard. It is a beautiful space, and I love that for her. I love that she has that space, that she took the time to thoughtfully consider and plan and build that space. I love that she loves it and has something so meaningful for her in her own backyard. And also, I don't want to do it. Like, I've been to her house. She's invited me. I'm free to use it. She has a mobile labyrinth that travels with her. I can use that. I don't want to. It's a spiritual practice. I'm just going to be honest with y'all, because that's what we're here for, right? It is a spiritual practice that drives me absolutely bananas. This is not a shock to you. No. We've teased each other about this over the years, but here's the thing. We're not in competition with each other as much as I set up this little story for us to have a chuckle this morning. We're really not in competition with one another, and just because we find different ways to connect with God doesn't mean that one of us is more or less spiritual or faithful than the other person, because we all connect to God in the ways we do because it's how we're hardwired. God made us certain ways, and we like certain things and dislike others and have some spiritual practices that fit our personalities better than others, and it's fine. We don't have to compare ourselves to one another and say, oh, that person is more spiritual because they're doing X, Y, Z, and I don't do that. Or I'm more spiritual than that person because I do this and they don't. Let's hear from Luke this morning. Now, as they went on their way, Jesus entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks. It So she came to him and asked, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Then tell her to help me. But the Lord answered her, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is only need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her. Now, I'm going to do a little poll here. Maybe I'll be surprised, but maybe not. Who has heard messages where Martha was doing the absolute wrong thing and Jesus was taking her to task? Right? And Mary was doing the absolute best thing, and Jesus was like saying, Martha, you're doing something wrong. Well, let's look at what's happening here, first of all. Okay, so the first thing that we have to consider is the cultural norms of the time. Lots of folks are at her home. Martha needs to take care of them. She is doing what is expected and what is the social norm of the time. Hospitality was important. People present would have been expecting her to offer them a meal and to care for them. Okay? So if we think that Jesus is taking her to task for doing what was expected of her, let's think about this. Not long before this, Jesus had sent something like 70 disciples out into the world and told them not to take anything with them, okay? No clothes, no food, no shoes. Just show up in town, in like random towns, start healing folks, start sharing the good news about God, go to somebody's house, knock on the door and say, peace be with you. Then those people will invite you in and feed you and clothe you and give you a place to stay. So that's one Jesus story. Later in Luke, Jesus talks about having a banquet for friends and family. But instead of inviting your friends and family, instead think about inviting others who can't repay with their own hospitality. And in another text in Matthew, we hear Jesus teaching about how when you feed other people who are hungry, and when you give people who are thirsty something to drink, and when you give people clothing that they need, you do that also for him. 3 examples already. Clearly we know that Jesus knew that hospitality was kind of the thing of the culture. I think that's pretty safe to say. He wasn't trying to say it wasn't important, and he wasn't even criticizing Martha for her work. The Martha is more likely Jesus trying to get her attention and help her pause for just a minute. At the same time that Martha was doing her important work, Mary was also doing something important too, soaking in Jesus's teachings. He was so compelling, and his teachings were so vital and needed to her life, she couldn't help but sit there and soak it all in. She needed to hear what he had to say. So neither woman was wrong. Neither woman was in the wrong. Yet we've often heard messages of them being pitted against one another. Like there has to be some kind of Jesus reality show competition about which woman has the better faith. You know, if we look at our own culture, as a little bit of an aside, I'm not a man, I can't speak for men, but I would imagine it's pretty similar. Women in our culture are pitted against each other. Like we have to be in competition with one another. And I have a feeling it's the same for men in different ways, but the same. We don't have to be in competition with one another. In other translations, so let's get in the weeds for just a second, but stick with me, okay? In other translations than the one used this morning, like in the Greek, which I don't pull out very often because I'm not a Greek scholar, but this is important. Martha's task is referred to as ministry. Martha's task is referred to as ministry, as in what Martha is described as doing are the same words that in later texts, deacons are described as doing. She's actively working to care for people. So if we keep this in mind, perhaps we can stay away from those old tropes of Martha fussing at Mary, or being demanding of Mary or of Jesus. And Mary, when we look at her, she has this desire to know God more intimately, to understand and mull over what faith means in the moment she's in, as it's being presented to her. She is just soaking it all in that very moment. She is caught up in the awe, in the wonder of faith and of Jesus right then. And nothing else matters to her, and nothing else is going to stop her from experiencing that awe and that wonder. Now, Jesus does tell Martha that she's a little bit distracted and that she could pause for a moment, and that what Mary is doing is okay, and that what Mary needs to be doing is what Mary needs to be doing. But he never says that the work that the ministry that Martha is doing is less worthy or less important. So instead of setting these two women against one another, like many of us have been taught, we can realize that both Mary and Martha are doing worthy things that are both needed. We don't have to choose one or the other. We don't have to see them as representing opposite ends of the spiritual spectrum, as doing good works or having a good faith. That is a false dichotomy. It is not, they are not the opposite. We need both to have a rich and robust faith, and they are often intermingled. So often, this story has been used to uphold a belief that our salvation is found in God through works or through faith. That is an old, tired theological argument. Like we have to pick one side. Like works or faith make us a better Christian than somebody else. That does not accurately represent Jesus' teachings, either in this particular story snippet or when we look at Jesus' teachings as a whole. In this one text, we do see Jesus encouraging both women to sit and ponder and be present in the moment. But in other texts, like the Good Samaritan last week, and even if you weren't here last week, I'm sure you're probably pretty familiar with the story of the Good Samaritan. In that story, there wasn't much time for sitting or pondering or reflecting on one's faith. In that text, we see faith expressed through immediate action. So clearly, Jesus had a grip on the idea of faith and works being intermingled. The one thing, though, that this text can help us do is ask some questions of ourselves. Do we have a good balance in our life of the things that we need to help us help other people and to reflect and spend time in wonderment and awe of Jesus? One scholar I read this week reminds us that we all need formation and practice. We all need active faith and faithful action. We all need active faith and faithful action. It's not one or the other, it's both and. Now, I read a story this week from Nadia Bolz-Weber. I don't know who's familiar with her. Some of you really are. She's amazing. Go on the internet, find her, read her stuff, read her books. If you don't like salty language, I will say maybe she is not for you, but she is spectacular, okay? So I read a story about her she used to have a church in Denver that got pretty popular, and now she's more like a national theologian and does a lot of writing and speaking. So when she was in her church, one time she was having a church meeting with the leadership of her church, like her elders and her church board. They call it something else, but that's what it was. And in that church meeting, she complained loudly and in her uniquely snarky way about how a lot of folks weren't helping set up for church or clean up after. They had this church where you had to set up every Sunday and where you had to tear it down every Sunday. And so basically in this church, just a few people were always stuck doing the setup and doing the cleanup, right? Which is a familiar church story. A few people do the work for most people. And this was ticking her off. And folks would come in like 5 minutes before church started, grab their cup of coffee, sit down, enjoy the worship service, and then skedaddle right after. And she did not like this, and she thought more people ought to be doing it. And so she had a lot to say about it one Sunday, which if you read or hear her speaking, you can imagine that's probably pretty powerful. And then, in a way that only God is able to show us our hubris, she went to her AA meeting of 10 years. And what did she do? She walked in 5 minutes before the meeting started. She grabbed her cup of coffee. She sat down in her chair. In chairs she had never once set up in 10 years, drinking coffee that she had never made or cleaned up in 10 years. For 10 years, others had been doing the work while she was sitting in the moment. So she says that experience, that very pointed experience that she believed was a moment from God, caused her to reflect on this particular text. That perhaps we're missing the point of it, she says, if we pick that this is about faith or works or action versus contemplation. Or if we think that this is some kind of moralizing text about which one is better and which one is not good. She says that we don't have to choose between action or contemplation, but she also says that this text is about distraction and judgment. I know, right? It's about distraction and judgment. How we're distracted by so many things. So much of the time. I mean, if we sit and reflect on our lives, can we honestly say we do not find ourselves distracted in our own lives? We spend a good portion of what's left of the time when we're not distracted by being in judgment of others, even judging others' faith, just like we've been taught to do with Mary and Martha. Can we honestly say that these distractions and this judgment isn't getting in the way of our own faith formation? Can we say any of these distractions or this judgment make our own faith stronger or better? I mean, come on, of course not, right? I mean, that was kind of a setup of a question, wasn't it? Yeah. So perhaps we can hear all of these things together, all right? The Mary and the Martha story today, the other teachings of Jesus that we know and that we hold close to our hearts. We can hear Nadia's story and realize that it's a time for an opportunity for maybe a reset in our spiritual life. How we live our faith isn't either or. Our faith is both and. And a reminder that our faith is seasonal. What helps and nurtures us changes over time, and what lessons we need to learn change over time. Sometimes we are in the place of the doer, the setting up, the one who makes sure things are done. Sometimes we are in the place of the one who is able to sit and reflect and think. And sometimes we are in both places at once, depending on who we are with and where we are. Our faith is seasonal. What we need changes over time. What we need to nurture it, what we need it to grow, how we seek our faith changes over time. So perhaps now, in this moment, or today, or later this week, or this time of Lenten reflection leading up to Easter can be a time for you to think about how you can reset and reprioritize some of the things in your life so that your faith can be nurtured in the ways that you need and in the ways that maybe God thinks that you need. Amen. I invite you to pray with me this morning. God of grace, we long to do the right thing. We long to make the right choice. We long to stand on the right side of dividing lines that we create. In our earnestness, sometimes, God, we miss the sacred right in front of us. In our earnestness, God, sometimes we miss the opportunities to show love and care. Show us how to hold our heart's desire for perfection loosely. Show us how to lead with grace and love over anything else. For even more than our desire to be right, God, we desire to be close to you. And help us remember this morning, and help us take in our hearts with us the good news of your gospel, the good news that gives peace to those who are hurting, the good news that provides safety to those who are living in fear, food and drink for those who aren't sure where their next meal is coming from. Help us to be the good news that is in every place and every time, even when we don't quite see it. The good news, God, that anchors your creation in your love. Show us your way, God. Amen.